right, you're watching Kivumbi 2017, and just before we went to the break, we were talking about the security situation in the country, and I want to bring in Simiyu Erunga. He's a security analyst. And Simiyu, what's the impact of these developments in the country? We've seen a number of strange events culminating, of course, today with the discovery that Chris Mohando was killed actually a few days ago.
Two things, Joe. One, we need to look at this incidents with the impact on our standing as a country in the region. People don't seem to understand the portfolio that this country holds in the region of Eastern Africa. The biggest problem we have in this country are people petrifying things to the level in which they want us to take their understanding of what the situation is. You cannot, for example, have the residence of a deputy president of this country being attacked by a person who is holding a machete and holding our elite police services for 18 hours. What this comes out to tell us is that either we are being cheated or there's something terribly wrong about how we undertake taking care of our VIPs in this country. Number two, we cannot understand from a layman's person how a person with a machete can actually hold a whole group of elite soldiers firing that weapon unless this person, we are told whether he trained somewhere, either he was using hawking as a decoy and the fellow was not a hawker, and therefore there's a lot of questions on what actually took place at the residency of the deputy president of this country.
So Simiyu, if I stop you there, I mean, as a security mind in this country, what are you thinking about right now as you see all these things happening with just a week to the election?
Something terrible. This country, I don't know how to put it, Joe, but there's something completely out of place in this country in terms of how we secure ourselves. And I heard some of your panelists saying, don't politicize this thing. The late, and I'm sorry I didn't condole with them earlier, the late was running a program, was in charge of a system that is running the politics of this country. And therefore, whatever happens, when you ask a good investigator, he will tell you there's something we call investigation through elimination. People will start speculating, but you eliminate one issue after another until you get to the right source and motive of this matter. What this has for this country is that people are losing complete faith in our security systems. They are not working to ensure that we look at them and feel safe that they can secure us, and therefore it plays in the minds of the voters and the Kenyan people, and it is incumbent upon our security organs and the government of this country to reassure Kenyans that whatever is happening, we can still take care of you and we can secure you during this process of electioneering, during the election period, and after the elections.
All right. Thank you very much, Simiyu Erunga, security analyst, speaking to us there on phone about this turn of events. And Dr. Awiti, you alluded to this earlier, that this doesn't look like coincidence.
Well, you know, listening to Simiyu, what comes to my mind is that it seems like we cannot chew gum and walk straight. That we can't have an intense, passionate electioneering process and still secure the people of this country. You know, it looks like our security apparatus are completely distracted by one thing and cannot be in all the places, keeping a watchful eye and making sure that all of us are safe. And as he says, you know, some of these things reflect really badly on us as a country. How can what happened at Mr. Ruto's home happen? A machete-wielding guy holding elite security forces for 18 hours. You know, how can the head of ICT for an election that is about 6 days away be without security? Given all the emotion and all the expectations that have been put behind the ICT as perhaps the universal panacea to get us out of the problems of 2013, 2007, etc. So there are so many stakes and so much money is being spent on this election, so that it is truly shameful that we have come to this moment of national grief and national shame.
But this all comes down to one thing, ladies and gentlemen, and I want us to talk about this right now, that in this country, elections, Martin, seem to be a matter of life and death. Why?
Which is very unfortunate, Joe. I mean, if I was looking for a job in KTN today, nobody would have problems with me coming for an interview. You can even put my name in the papers and you should list me and say I didn't make it. And life will go on. Basically, what we are having is that a group of Kenyans are looking for jobs. They're not going to be doing these things for free. They are going to be paid, and not just being paid. They're going to be paid handsomely. So why is it that we must kill, we must maim, we must bribe in order for us to actually elect leaders who we are going to pay anyway? These people are not going to serve us for free. They're not volunteers. So basically what we've done is that we've made this thing what it is not. I mean, I wish Kenyans in their ordinary sense could understand that what people are campaigning doing is looking for jobs. They are making applications.
But why do we take this thing?
This is what I'm saying.
Seriously?
Why is it that when I'm looking for a job, nobody even cares to know? Why is it that when a few Kenyans are looking for jobs, they make so much noise, they cause us to fight among ourselves, and then bribe us in the process?
Barack, why do we agree to do it? Why is it that in this country, elections have to come to this? Where, I mean, I know people, for example, who are stocking up. There are people who are saying we are not going to Kenya until they are sorted with this election thing.
You see,
how have we come to this?
It's actually primitive. We must accept to use that kind of idiom, that it is primitive. That when we are talking about deciding on how we are going to be governed and who is going to govern us, that ought to be one of our highest moments. We ought to be confident. We ought to be proud of our systems. But it boils down to something that I would like to call the philosophy of government. That government in our context and by large in Africa is a concept of philosophy of eating, so that you hear such things as it's our turn to eat. You hear such things as we are eating and you are drooling. And the arrangement is that the winner takes it all, so that there is panic. Panic of being defeated, panic of losing, panic of feeling like, hey, these people are going to oppress us. Panic, therefore, that starts taking group identity. Mm-hmm. And when that group identity does come in, it starts becoming a very dangerous and fragile situation.
Joy, life and death. Why?
Because we have made leadership in this country lucrative business. The people who are going into office, you will realize, some of them are going into office because they know what tenders they're going to follow, they know what they're looking for. Some have had colorful criminal pasts, and this is an opportunity to be above the law, as it were, because we've realized waheshimiwa in this country are hardly held to account. So people go because it's a way of protection. Others are going, for example, for these MCA seats because they've realized, oh, there is somewhere where we can behave like the big boys, but at a local level. So we've made leadership such a lucrative business that people are going into leadership not as a calling, but as a means out of poverty, is as a means of amassing wealth. That's why you see people negotiating deals of, like, if we go in this and that tender, you know, you hear that conversation going on. So making leadership a lucrative business, therefore, means that people want to get in, like Barack says, so that you can have your turn to control those resources. And when you look at it with our checkered past, especially with our inability to deal with corruption, that is why people are able to go in and actually, a man who went in with one car and a little house in Buruburu, by the time he's leaving, he has a fleet and he's got estates and he's got what? And we all know what they're earning. We know that they're not living within their means.
So later on we'll come back and talk about what we can do about this. But Kamodo, this was one of the things that the Constitution was supposed to solve.
Yeah.
50+1, for example, all these things were supposed to create an environment where people feel whoever wins, for example, has the real mandate of the people.
I think that's one aspect of what the Constitution was meant to achieve. But more importantly, the Constitution was supposed to decentralize power and make the presidency, particularly the presidency, because our fight in this country largely is about the presidency. I mean, there are fights at the local level, at the governor level, but the big one is for the presidency. The idea of the Constitution was to decentralize that power, ensure that some of it is shared by the county governments, ensure that some of it is checked, so that the president was not the one that controls every aspect of our lives. The reality is that while the Constitution has done a lot of that, in our own understanding of the presidency, we still see the presidency of the past. So in a sense, we believe that if the presidency goes, everything goes. The truth of the matter is that the presidency is still big, but it is not as big as it used to be. But I don't think for the politicians, it is useful to sell that. So the people who support Jubilee must be told that if the presidency goes, we have problems. The people in NASA must be told, you people, you're in problems. The only way your problems will go is if we win this seat. That is a lie. It is actually not true. The reality is that now people are entitled to government's resources as a matter of right, not as a matter of political privilege. And I think what we need to do is do more of that, so that the more we ensure that we are a rule-based system, the more we insist that we are decentralizing that power, this clamor for the top is going to keep reducing. But for now, I think we are still caught with the myth of the past. And so we're going to fight over it. But finally, when we get there, we're going to be disappointed. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to come to you, Felix, but I'm told that we have a presidential candidate on the line, and this has to do with the presidential ballot papers that arrived in the country a short while ago, and controversy is looming over the number of ballot papers that have been printed. Presidential candidate Ekuru Aukot has accused the IEBC of printing an extra 1.2 million ballot papers. IEBC, on the other hand, says there's no cause for alarm, as the extra papers are to cater for spoilt votes. And we can now speak to Dr. Aukot, who is on the phone right now. Dr. Aukot, what is your problem with extra ballot materials if they're all going to be accounted for at the end of the day?
Joe, thanks for this good question. First of all, 1% should be 196,000 ballots, not the current 6.15% that IEBC has printed. Number two, we have never had 100% turnout in any election in the history of Kenya, and therefore to print 6.1% of the ballot is already suspicious enough. Number three, IBC has not come out clean to actually explain why the extra ballot papers. I think their communication is so pathetic. It's very problematic. They really need to come out clean and ask and tell Kenyans why it is necessary to print out the 1.2 million ballots, especially in an election such as this one, which is so highly contested. There is so much mistrust, and you cannot therefore give people a reason to worry even more. And excuse me, yeah? Mm-hmm. And then secondly, lastly, Joe, we need to correlate this idea of ballot papers to possible election offenses, one of them being the possibility of stuffing ballots. So when you have extra ballots hanging around in an election that is so contested, so much mistrust, IEBC that has been beaten up and down by political class, I think it's not a very good idea. And I sent an agent to Dubai to do due diligence, not to admire the impressive technology at Al Ghurair, but to be able to actually count and confirm that the papers that are the ballot papers that are printed are actually congruent to the election. I mean, to the votes at every polling station.
So, what are you going to do about this?
Well, we have asked IBC one, destroy the 1.2 million ballot papers. That way, you build trust in Kenyans. I do not see why we should not have 1.2 million papers out there when we do not even have a proper explanation why we need them in the first place. We can already see electoral violence being committed by the death of Chris Msando. This is already electoral violence going on. As a matter of fact, I do not think that.
But to be fair, Dr. Aukot, to be fair, we still don't know what circumstances, those who are how he died and so on. We don't know that for sure, do we?
Joe, do you need rocket science to know that the fellow was actually tortured, and that all the signs we are seeing is that somebody was trying to extract information from him because, one, look at his position. This is the only man who was on top of the transmission at IEBC. He knew exactly how the results would be transmitted. Number two, look at his connection. You know, where he comes from, his political connection, I mean, by virtue of relation. I don't think we need rocket science to do that. I mean, this guy was basically tortured and killed because of probably what he knows about the election. So let's not pretend about...
Okay, finally, what do you think the impact of this is going to be?
As I said, we are witnessing firsthand electoral violence being committed on members of the IEBC. Right now, I am so much worried that the members of the IEBC may not even be in the right state of mind to be able to hold this election. We are already talking about issues of credibility of this election. If you start killing the referees, who is even there to manage this election in the first place, to even count the vote? We are already intimidating them. I can imagine Chebukati and his guys must be scared, completely scared about managing this election. They may not even be in the right state of mind to give us a fair, credible election.
All right, Dr. Okot, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us in this conversation on Kivumbi 2017. And Felix, he raises important issues, I think, about the state of mind of the IEBC officials right now as they conduct this. What is that we can do in 6 days to give Kenyans a sense that what we are going to have on August 8th is a good election?
Well, first of all, I think we need to retrace our steps. As difficult and as painful as this death might be, and obviously is, we should remember that this guy who has been killed for sure was committed to having technology work in this election. And I think the best legacy we can bequeath him is actually to ensure that we rededicate ourselves and IEBC should come out very, very clearly. I mean, some of the issues that our court is raising is an issue of communication. We're dealing, and that is what...
Like the ballot papers,
like the
extra
ballot papers.
Do you understand yourself why they are 1.2 million instead of 100, I don't know, 96 or something?
No, whereas I understand that we need to print extra ballot papers, there has to be a rationale and a justification as to why we need 1.2. And unless IEBC engage stakeholders, and unless IEBC is open in its communication and explain the rationale, which, by the way, sometimes can make sense, then people will continue to ask questions because we are dealing with the high-stake elections where the incumbent is seeking a re-election. There's another problem, by the way, that just caught my eyes with regard to the Forms 34s that IEBC will be using for the transmission of the presidential results. In the last election in 2013, we used the equivalent of Forms 34 was Form 36. Now, in the Form 36, we had the column for the results, and we added the second column where the aggregate of the totals that each presidential candidate got was recorded there at the constituency level. That is the collation that is required. Now, in light, what IEBC has done in the regulations, they have produced a Form 34B, which is not aligned to the Court of Appeal ruling. And this is how. They've listed the result. There is a column for the results, but there is no column for aggregates.
At the constituency.
At the totals, at the constituency. What it means is that the aggregate, or IEBC, is trying to circumvent that ruling and have the tallying of constituency results happen at Bomas. And that is undermining that very rule. They're both here. I have both forms here.
Just a quick one.
That's very interesting. Yes, Martin. Yes, Martin.
I think that you gave Dr. Aukot an opportunity to say something, and as a lawyer, I thought he was going to be more articulate. Election offenses do not happen on the 8th. They start now. So if you are in this election, you should be building up data and material for possible election petition. So when you're asking, what are we going to do?
the chief agents of every presidential candidate must now hold IBC to account for the total materials. When they are being distributed, an account must be given so that they know where these materials are and where they are going to be deployed. So as soon as you do an audit trail and you see a difference, that is a petition issue. So really, it's not about complaining and whining. In every election, do expect that certain things will happen that will actually give you ammunition for a petition or evidence for petition. So in this particular case, it's not about shouting and scaring. It's about saying we are going to follow up on this.
So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to come back here to get some closing thoughts, but I want to go to my colleague Joy Doreen Bera, who's been following what Kenyans on social media are saying about the conversation we're having here. Joy, what's happening out there?
Well, Joe, there's quite a lot that people are saying, especially with the conversation that you're having with our panelists there. And I would just like to also pull them into this same conversation so you can hear exactly what they're saying. Gadara is saying it is not that citizens don't trust each other. They don't, and rightly so, trust the system. It was not built to serve them. That's what Gadara is saying. But we also have some more feedback here. Free, fair election and peaceful election. Kila mtu apate haki yake, nothing more. That's what Nelson Omondi is saying. And let's now take a look at our Twitter poll question that we asked earlier on at about 6 p.m. today. We asked, what is the most important issue to you in this election? And take a look at the results. From the options we gave our audience, that is the cost of living, security, health, and corruption, 44% said that the most of the issues that they really want sorted out as per se, or as per a question here, said the cost of living. That was the highest at 44%. 18% said security, health went down as the least of them, and yet could actually be the most important. All our respondents, there was just 5% who actually said health was the most important, and corruption took 33%, coming in second after cost of living and security, while health came in last. But take a look at the number of people who actually took part in this poll. We had 4,241 respondents or subscribers who voted in the poll, so that should tell you quite a bit about how much people are following the conversation here. Let's take a look at more feedback. And Mohammed Mahat, you're saying corruption is the most pressing issue, but it seems the insecurity is taking the upper hand. And we also have one coming in from Sony, who is saying health sector has been neglected for long. We want it addressed once and for all. And we also have Hesbon, who is saying peace among all Kenyans and free and fair elections. That is Hesbon in Ruaka. And we have Kevin Osido, who is saying cost of living, corruption, security. Cost of living, corruption, security, and services. And we also have Chris Candia, who is saying for the elections to be credible and to elect leaders who will tackle corruption and the cost of living and to address unemployment. That is one of the top issues coming up. And we also have one coming in from Sony, who is saying the health sector. I think we already looked at that one. And Thomas Mwaniki, you're saying 1, corruption, 2, the TJRC report, 3, food security, and 4, a leader, not a ruler, 5, unemployment, 6, high cost of living, and others. And we also have Smooth Criminal. This is quite an interesting Twitter handle. You're saying tribalism, the gap between the rich and the poor, land, security, and devolution. And finally, we have Edwin Chepto, who is saying, I'm so keen on employment issues. I still believe that Uhuru will solve these problems. That is Edwin from Mogosho in the Rift Valley. But well, you're all entitled to your opinions. Let us know what you think about the elections. And you can do this by reaching out to us on all the digital platforms, that is Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And if you can send us videos, you have WhatsApp and Skype to do that. And we'll be sure to share your views on Kivumbi 2017. Back to you, Joel.
All right, thank you very much, Joy Doreen Bera. I think now you can go to bed. Thank you very much. I'll just come back to the panel here, and we want to take this home. And I want to start with you, Joy, and each one of you to just tell me very briefly what exactly we need to do between now and August 8th so that we can still have an election that at the end of it, Kenyans can say, well, we had a good election, we can move on with our lives.
I want to pick it up with what Martin was saying. the political party players in this process need to educate themselves on how the process works, so that if they have a clarification, they themselves have answers to the questions. For example, the questions that Dr. Aukot is raising. I have sat on 2 or 3 forums with the IEBC where they have come out very clearly to try and explain why extra papers. They've given us the reason of a booklet has got 50 pages, some get to 44, so you have to fill that. They have given us a matrix that seems to make some sense. Because when we issue statements carelessly, we raise temperatures to a level where people have unnecessary tension. And we don't need that right now. Kenya is already in a pressure cooker situation. Something small could set it off. And I wish our leaders would look at matters more soberly. I agree with him. You make your case right now. If you need it, take it to court later. But at the end of the day, let us remember that Kenya has to be a going concern come the 9th of August. So let's do our best to keep it that way.
Dr. Awiti?
You know, if you ask me, between now and 8th, I would be so happy if Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta are locked in one room until they learn just one chorus to tell their supporters that they must trust the electoral process, that it will deliver a free and fair election. The second one goes back to the point that Joy just made. I think IEBC has been extraordinarily incompetent in communicating to the public about this so-called extra ballot scandal. I don't understand how you pay such top dollars to this so-called Al Ghurair guy, and then you get bound on these 50 ballots in one booklet. Now, what that creates is 933,000 ballots that we don't need. And we're paying about 20 shillings per ballot. How do you explain that? Because what you then end up with is that you do the 1% on any polling station. So let's say, for instance, you have 700 voters. You do 1%, that is 7. What this Al Ghurair formula then does is that you cannot add 7 ballots. You add 50. That is one booklet to that. So what you end up is with 750. So you can do the math and see how many extra ballots, and I've done some of the calculations. You end up with between 32 and 88% more ballots than a polling station needs. Now, here's where the suspicion is, because everybody now thinks, what are you going to do with the 933,000 ballots that you're not going to use? And how are you going to spend extra security resources to secure the 933 ballots that we don't need? Why do we have to get into these unnecessary expenses and create unnecessary anxiety in the country? Shame on Mr. Chebukati.
Wow. Barak?
Joe, I speak with the humility of 30 years of publishing history behind me. And therefore, I know all there is to know about book publishing and book binding.
That's a good reason why I had you on this panel.
Printing and book binding. And there's absolutely no reason why you should have an extra 50 pages where they are not necessary. That we have all seen books with blank pages. That if it is necessary that you must have extra material because the printers charge you for the paper that they have used, then you are going to have blank pages. And those blank pages at the stage that is called the imposition will allow you not to have extra material that you do not need. And the printers understand what I'm talking about. My fellow publishers can attest to that. The biggest challenge that we have about this election is absence of something called openness. Even if these 50 extra pages per booklet were completely necessary, I'm told in some cases there are 4 pages, in some other cases there are 6 pages, and whatever, IEBC should have proactively come out and told the people that this is what we are going to do. They don't have to wait until somebody is asking them about it. Then they come and start explaining. IEBC engages in the communications of firefighting. They do not engage in communications of openness. And the thing that they must do, IEBC, is to ensure that from now, for the rest of the steps forward, they take charge of their communication. They should not even leave Jubilee to be the ones who are speaking.
Okay, that's a whole
speaking for them. Because that is the impression
that's a whole discussion.
That we get, Joe.
That's a whole discussion. Kamoza Waiganjo.
I think we are a country, and especially as a season like now, we are a country of conspiracy theory. And the only way that you're going to defeat that is information. And in fact, we have said this on this screen many times. Give the information before. If this information had been explained before, it would actually make sense. And also, people will even forgive you even where you make mistakes. So it is critical that we explain ourselves, we give information. We actually, as somebody said, we over-inform, because that's the only way we're going to kill the stories of conspiracy theories. Having said that, we must also tell our politicians and other political actors, not every situation must be milked for its political capital, because what it is doing is increasing tensions unnecessarily. That is not to say, as Barack would assume, it is censorship, but to be responsible. We have elections in 7 months. I doubt that any needle is going to move.
7 days.
7 days, sorry, before the elections. I doubt that any needle is going to significantly move between now and Tuesday. So let us tone the rhetoric, and let us encourage Kenyans to turn up and vote and believe that the institution we so painstakingly working on will give us a credible election. But be alert. Yeah.
All right, Felix, take us home.
We are lucky that one of the leaders of the election observation group missions in Kenya for this election, President John Dramani Mahama of Ghana, is leading the Commonwealth mission. Now, President Mahama is an embodiment that there is a life outside of the presidency. And is being a vice president, but also is being a leader of opposition. In fact, he's now in the opposition. I think his presence should tell us, as it did in Ghana, that our elections need not necessarily be this high stake. Special responsibility is on President Uhuru Kenyatta and the presidency to facilitate a credible, a free, and a fair election. But also similar and corresponding responsibility is on Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Finally, I still am in the opinion that we can still make technology work despite the setback. Let me say this for the record. There is no country in the world that has achieved 100% electronic voting, and therefore a combination of manual and electronic voting is, manual voting and electronic voting is required. But IBC should, in my opinion, to promote credibility and confidence in the process between now and next week, invite the presidential candidates, the 8 of them, the way KIMS was designed. If, as a result of this death, there was unauthorized access, that technology should be able to spot. We need technology experts to interrogate and assess whether there has been unauthorized.
All right. Thank you very much, Felix Onwar. We're ending up a discussion that I think could go on for 2 or 3 hours, but I told you that the lady and gentleman you see here will be part of our election conversation between now and even after August 8th. So you want to keep it KTN News as we continue to give you the whole story about this election in a way that only we can. So do have a lovely evening. My name is Joe Agayo. God bless you.
KTN News, your official election station.